Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our second edition of K-Talk, our monthly live show with all the exciting topics of the coming trade show K in the German city of Düsseldorf. Long before the exhibitors built up their booth on the show floor in October, the topics and technologies are being prepared. Good for us, so we can discuss about them already now. The title of today's edition is Modern Medicine Needs Plastics, and my guests are true experts in the medical sector. Here we go. Welcome, Professor Dr. Ute Schäfer, Head of the Experimental Neurotraumatology at the Medical University of Graz, Austria. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Next is Martin Herzmann, responsible for business development at company Kumovis with its headquarters in Munich, Germany. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And number 3 is Dr. Philipp Engel, Head of Segment Medical Systems Europe at Evonik. Thanks for joining, Philipp, and welcome.
Hello, happy to be here.
Before we start with our discussion, I'd like to invite you to participate and send your questions and remarks to us here in the studio. I will pass them on to my guests and we will try to answer them during the show. So don't be shy. The more you participate, the more fun we all have. So let's start. My first question goes to you, Philipp. Would today's medicine work without plastics?
I think this is a very easy answer to give because it's clearly a no. We have the material, all types of polymers in so many different fields being used in our everyday medicine. Everyone knows it, who goes to the hospital, faces it, and so we have it everywhere, and it actually is a lifesaver. I think what is important to give a short context of what we talk about in this field, and this is always when we have some sort of body contact. So we need a special polymer, not the off-the-shelf industrial grades, but a special medical grade that can serve these specific needs, which we are going to be talking about more in detail, I'm sure.
Dr. Schäfer, how would your daily job look like if there wouldn't be any plastics?
In the clinic, it wouldn't work at all. I mean, you start with syringes, you know, anything you have in the hospital, most of the stuff is made from plastics. In the field, you know, we prefer to say polymers rather than plastics because it's got such a negative touch. However, you know, without polymers or plastic, whatever you want to call it, life in hospital is not possible at the moment. Also, you know, for sterility, you know, we have to change syringes all the time. But as Philipp said already, you know, we are also using plastics and polymers now to, you know, with the 3D technology, 3D printing technology, you know, to make our own medical products.
And we will talk about that in the course of our today's show because we have plenty of time, so we don't need to rush. But before we start and jump into the deep dive of plastics in the medicine sector, Martin, how would your job look like without any plastics, apart from the fact that you're building machines to work with plastics? But what would be the rest of the day like?
Exactly what you said. So it would be challenging as my current employer, Kumovis, is only looking into polymer printing, which means there are 3D printing technologies out there established for a long time working with metal. However, Kumovis is only looking into polymer printing, which means we probably would not exist if polymers would not exist. So it is our core competence to print those polymers where there's a huge variety. And I think that's the magic of that material, that there are so much different properties and indications for plastics, for polymers. So my current job would not exist, to be very precisely and frankly spoken. We would probably print something else, but the magic currently lays in plastics and polymers, not so much in other materials, I believe, from my personal perspective.
It's good to hear that we're talking about magic today. I wouldn't have expected that. So it's good to have this. Ute, you mentioned in one of your first sentences that you prefer saying polymers instead of plastics because there is in fact an image problem that polymers and plastics do have in the public. And this problem did not start in the medical sector, but apart from that. So it comes from marine litter, it comes from misbehaving when treating and handling plastics. So the medical sector for sure is not the starting point for the image problem, right, Philip?
Yes, I would agree with you. I think that's really important to point out that, especially in the medical field, the polymers are the solution provider that enable us to save patients' life, to make patients' life better, and they are not the problem but the solution. And this should be highlighted, and it covers all types that every one of us is facing in the medical industry or in the as a patient ourselves. So when we go to the doctor, we mentioned the syringes, it goes for catheters that are saving lives after a heart attack, and it goes up the way to implants for artificial joints or bone replacements, where people just would not be able to live with our polymer solutions, and not considered as a problem, but as a solution.
Okay, in our today's talk, we will surely have to deal with the two sides of plastics in the medical sector. The one is the medical products that we all need and that we see in the clinics, at doctors and so on. So you mentioned that, like syringes, like rubber gloves, like tubes, IV tubes and all that stuff. And on the other side, there is the polymer innovations, I would call them, that help you as the experts to provide a better life quality to the patient. So I would like to start with the first family of products, Martin. We've seen in the last decades a heavy increase of products made from plastic in this segment. Give me some examples, please, where plastics are extremely needed and cannot be substituted by anything else.
From a medical perspective, and Ute can probably elaborate on that, from a medical perspective, we look into implants which stay in the body. We look into instruments which are temporarily used in patient contact, and with guides. And guides help surgeons to find their way to place screws to do resections. For the implant area, I would say the plastics and the polymers are crucial because of their properties, such as X-ray translucency. So you can see them in X-rays, and you still can see the soft tissue behind that. In the past, once you work with titanium, for example, and it's not bashing titanium, it has its benefits. But for tumor surgery, polymers are more beneficial because of patients' follow-ups. You can X-ray shine through those implants and can see the growth of the tumor, the growth of the bone, instead of seeing a big black screen on the X-ray image. So that is, for example, one huge benefit where we see in the implant side benefit. On the other side, for instruments, you can discuss pros and cons, but the growth of single-use instruments is enormous to see. We can discuss about the waste we produce with that, but we can also discuss about the cleaning probabilities and the sterility of those parts, which are certainly beneficial for handling and lowering the costs for hospitals. And the use of guides, it's a single-use device. So surgically used guides are individualized, and therefore the costs for metal would not benefit, I believe, or would not stand in relation to the benefit, which means in that clinical application, polymers absolutely make sense. And maybe one last sentence in discussion for that plastic versus polymers. I think we have a similar discussion with additive manufacturing versus 3D printing. The broad community is talking about 3D printing, while the industry is talking about additive manufacturing. At the end, it's the same. So we lower the threshold to enter that area once we don't do this word picking, but accept that it means the same. But I fully agree that plastic is waste, while polymers is the solution.
Ute, maybe we can talk about the day-by-day job that you're doing in Graz. For example, the medical devices that we had in the past were mainly made from metal materials. So they needed to be sterilized, they needed to be handled very often. From an ecological point of view, to me as an outsider, it seems like the better solution instead of having single-use materials. But for you as a professional, where do you see the magic of this new material?
As I say, if you go by the day-to-day life in hospital, so you know what nurses, you know, and caretakers and medics have to face every day, you know, of course it makes life and treating patients a lot easier if you have disposable, sterile material which you use once and then it's thrown away. You know, but they're disposable but not degradable. Therefore, you know, as Martin mentioned, you know, we do produce a lot of waste. On the other hand, you know, if you look at the machines, if you look at blood pressure machines, they're all full of plastic. Everything, you know, everywhere is full of plastic or polymer, whatever you want to call it, right? So there is no way around it. Our world, you know, is just not possible in the hospital more than everywhere else without polymers, really. I mean, there is a lot. I mean, you've probably seen that in newspapers and everywhere where families try to live without plastic. I mean, even in the family, it's totally, you know, impossible to live without plastic. But in the hospital, as you said, the advantage is, you know, it's you open a syringe, it's totally clean, it's sterile. You use it once, you know, and you throw it away. If you have, you know, materials which you have to sterilize, you are never as sure that it's totally sterile, you know, as if you just open it and, you know, use it the first and only time. So that's the advantage. But, you know, we're not very different from plastic bags if it comes to you know, we have disposables which are not degradable, and we make a lot of waste in the hospital, you know.
But that's there is a special situation, because in comparison to the household plastic bags, in the clinical use, those bags are, for example, used for biohazard materials, which have to be separated from the outside world in order to avoid any problems. Philip, those materials do not have any alternative, right?
Well, I think the key question we have to ask for these consumables in the hospital environment is really the aspect of safety. And that's really also in the entire medical device industry, I would say, the dominating factor. So what is the compromise you pay if you would sacrifice on safety? And I think no one of us would like to have that. And that's when you have these single-use devices or consumables in the clinics that are used once and maybe disposed afterwards. That's something I think we all want to take instead of having the risk of getting an infection or something else. And so the question is, what is the priority you have for the patients and in the hospitals? And I would say safety is clearly the first. We do everything to make it as safe as possible. And that's the reason why we are where we are at the moment. And as Martin also said, in some cases, even moving away from maybe reusable instruments and so on to single-use equipment, because that benefit is just dominating.
Martin, I saw it from your body language that you would like to add something, right?
Thank you very much for keeping that eye open. Yes, I just want to add one aspect, and probably Evonik is more into that, but we release polymers as well for re-sterilization. So we can use those materials. It currently sounds like there's metal to be used forever and there's polymers to be thrown away. I believe the truth is somewhere in between, that there are single-use instruments and necessities to have those single-use devices. On the other side, there are polymer instruments and there are medical devices which can be reused, re-sterilized. And this is kind of a quality check which happens up front to make sure that there's an equivalency to existing metal tools, metal instruments. Once we talk about devices which are plastic devices, which are polymer devices, but they can be sterilized in normal conditions in hospitals, so they are not thrown away immediately. So just to keep that black and white discussion, the polymers offer a range in between. So not every polymer is a waste material.
Apart from the medical sector, I would say in the rest of the polymer world, did you notice Ute has already educated me? So I'm talking about polymers, not plastics. So in the rest of the world, the industries try to build up a circular economy. That means in order to throw away plastics, bring them back to life after their usage, and avoid virgin materials by reusing plastics again. Do you see a chance to have this in the medical sector as well, Dr. Schäfer?
I see what Martin is saying, but it's not quite as easy because it depends on the polymer. You can only sterilize polymers which are not thermolabile. For example, PMMA and polymers like those, it's going to be really, really difficult to sterilize again. You know, there is ways to do it, but that would be really expensive and really time consuming. So, you know, really, I suppose Martin is talking a little bit of implants, you know, which might be sterilized again once, you know, they might be infected. I don't know, but, you know, the soft polymers, to sterilize them in the clinic will be very difficult. Again, as we have shown that too, it's not so easy, and there's another point to it. We have European law, and by European law, a lot of the plastics we use in hospital are not allowed to be sterilized again. So you know, it's some of them could be, but they're not allowed to now by the new regulations. You know, by the new medical product regulations. So that's, I think the hospital is a different kind of field where, as Philip said beforehand, safety has the highest priority. Patient safety goes above all. So before we re-sterilize, you know, plastics, we really, you know, would try to use, you know, single ones, you know, to be sure that our patients are safe. And as I said, the medical regulations now, you know, forbid us, for example, if there is an implant which falls on the floor, you know, we cannot pick it up and put it in sterilization and then use it again. That's it. It has to be thrown away.
When talking about this topic with you as the experts, I would like to take the opportunity to talk one topic which is crucial and important in the medical sector as well, which is cost. There is an extreme cost pressure on clinics, on the companies working in the medical sector. So even though the technology level and the level of innovation is extremely high, on the other side, the cost pressure as well is extremely high on all the actors in this industry. So what difference makes the use of plastic in terms of cost? Philip, for example, what is your opinion? Can we reduce the cost today and in the future by the use of more plastics?
Yes, and short answer is yes, but I don't think it's just a yes for everything. You really have to look at the application, the polymer we're talking about. But let me just give one example that fits to the group we are having here today very well. And this is the production of implants, custom-made implants that are patient-specific, made from the polymer PEEK, which is one of our products. So typically, they go into applications where you need a patient-specific implant for a skull injury, for example. And the state of the art is that you're milling these polymers. So from large blocks, you're milling them down to this patient-specific design. And of course, this causes a huge amount of waste, and this costs a lot of money because of all that wasted material. And I think this is something guiding into the future very well, where new processing technologies and new value chains are being established right now, together with all the group we have here, that now these patient-specific implants are printed and much less waste, maybe not no waste at all, but significantly less and in a shorter time. And overall, this will, of course, also lead to a cost saving in the end.
Martin, do you share this opinion?
Right, absolutely. And exactly what you were talking about, Philip. We started with the first application, which are cranial implants. So cranial implants are neurosurgical or craniomaxillofacial implants, which are 3 millimeter thick and are patient individual. In the past, it was a block, and I would say, and correct me if you have other numbers, but at least 85% are thrown away and 15% end up as an implant. With 3D printing and additive manufacturing, you turn it the upside down and turn it around, and you have to have support structures, which are only 15%, and the rest of those 85% end up as an implant, which means you reduce waste. By reducing waste, you reduce costs because material does cost money. So I do believe that there is significant saving potentials by using polymers for those applications. I fully agree on that, that there is the cost driver, and that's why we as Kumovis started to exist, to challenge those traditional manufacturing technologies, not by replacing those, but by adding clinical applications where it does make sense to use additive manufacturing, which can be instruments, implants, guides.
And with this said, I would like to switch to the second topic I already mentioned, which is the individual application of 3D printed devices, which can be used, for example, as implants and further applications. We come to this now. So on the one side, the mass-produced cheap products for the single use, and on the other side, the individually calculated and manufactured devices for the single patient. Dr. Schäfer, what does the today's clinic life look like by the help of these 3D printed products? Give us some examples where you can use this technology in the clinic.
Okay. Martin has already started to talk about cranial implants. I think that's a very good example. We have started to do that about 8 to 10 years ago, and we have started with PEEK about 8 to 10 years ago, you know, to look whether we can use that for patients. Let me give you an example. If a patient has a tumor and the tumor grows into the cranium, then the tumor end part of the cranial bone has to be replaced. So, you know, the tumor is taken out, part of the bone is taken out, the patient is then kept in hospital. There's only the skin on top of his brain, there's no more, you know, because the cranial bone has been taken out. We then have ordered the cranial implant at medical product providers. That takes up to 6 weeks, where the patient is still very ill because he had the tumor and has to have treatment, still in hospital, but the brain is not protected. And the bone starts growing again, of course. So by the time we get the cranial implant from the medical product provider, you know, it doesn't fit properly. So, and the patient has to be operated again. The tumor surgery is one of the very good examples where you can see if we made our own implants, we could do that during the operation. So the patient is treated, you know, the tumor is removed, part of the cranium is removed at the same time, or in parallel, we could print an implant which could then be used immediately for this patient. The patient wouldn't have to lie in hospital without, you know, a brain protection. He wouldn't have to have a second operation. So that's a lot cheaper. That alone is a lot cheaper. Also, you know, when we wait 5 to 6 weeks, you know, for an implant, even if the patient is not so ill, we still have to start milling in the operation theater, you know, because either the bone doesn't fit or the implant doesn't fit anymore. So, you know, printing at the point of care, you know, makes the whole thing safer, faster, and we have less complications. So that's a very important advantage of additive manufacturing, as Martin would call it, at the point of care.
if I got you right, you take the production of the needed part in your own hands. That means you moved the manufacturing process from the supplier, from the provider, into the clinic. But with that said, you also move the responsibility and the quality control things into your own hands. And I assume that changes the clinical life as well, right, Martin?
You're right. It changes the clinical life and the responsibilities. If a hospital starts to manufacture medical devices, they do not enter the level of a medical device company. So it's not a legal manufacturer in that perspective. And there is, thankful enough for European law now, there is a guideline which has to be read correctly and which has to be announced correctly, so that we are now allowed to do 3D printing at point of care. In the past, America with the FDA was very clear and very precise in what is allowed and what is the responsibility of surgeons, of physicians, of quality management. European law was lacking behind and we only had guidelines. Now with the release of MDR, it's explicitly announced that this is technically possible and is promoted. They are not by heart invited. They have their clear guidelines, and hospitals have to stick to those guidelines. However, the guidelines are on a lower level, I would say, compared to medical device companies, because those applications are limited. So it's not on the same, you can do whatever is technically possible and implant this into your patients because you have a printer or a other manufacturing device at hand. You carefully have to set up a quality management system comparable to industry standards. And this is sometimes a challenge for hospitals. However, as patient education gets more and more popular and surgeons sometimes have to press the reset button because every diagnosis first Googled before you encounter a surgeon or a physician, probably it's very important to really have a clear understanding from the physician side that it is possible, and this but must be elaborated wisely, what is related to that with quality management, post-market surveillance, or continuous learning, with processes, validation, qualification. Those industry standards translated into hospital environments are applicable, and then it's possible, yes.
Philip, to me, that sounds as if through this new approach, we are loading a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of the doctors, of the surgeons in the clinics. Afterwards, I will ask Ute Schäfer as well how she feels with that new kind of working environment. But first of all, Philip, do you feel comfortable with the situation where the responsibility of manufacturing, even on a low scale, is transferred to people who haven't collected experience with that for the last years?
I don't think it's that easy to say that they don't have experience, for example. But and I also want to say I don't think they are alone. Yeah? Because you have to look at the full value chain and every responsibility someone in the value chain takes, and that starts with the raw material. So we have our liability to make sure the product is safe, is clean, is always the same quality, and we have the controls and the documentation to provide this to all our customers. It is clear in the medical device industry that the person who in the end designs the implant, decides how thick does it need to be, what's the geometry. In the end, they carry the responsibility. It has always been like this, and I believe it will always be like this. And this is good because they are the only ones who can decide what the final product needs to look like. But as I said, they're not alone from the raw material perspective, but also from the processing perspective, because this is also controlled. There are tight quality controls. It's all validated systems, validated processes. And this comes then also the combination of material, processing, and then the design And taking all that together, I think, yes, there is the responsibility, but it's on several shoulders along the value chain, and this way we can make it safer.
Professor Schäfer, do you feel comfortable with the actual situation, or do you wish for additional support from, for example, a network of companies, of institutes, of other scientists?
Well, actually, I have to say we are at the moment in a network of companies and other scientists during the development of the additive manufacturing for implants, or at the point of care. It is, as Martin said, challenging in that we have to have a very tight QM system, for this new production. We are becoming a medical product provider. But having said that, we do develop our own medicine all the time. We are doing, new cancer medicines, which are developed in the clinic. We get, patient blood, which we transfer to cancer medicine. We have a very, very high standard and very tight QM system for this. In every single clinic, we have QM officers, who look into the clinics and everything. So it's not as if we are running, into something, with closed eyes and haven't got a clue. Yes, becoming a medical product provider is new to the clinic, and a lot of clinics are hesitant there because that's a totally new field, to make your own implants all of a sudden. But I personally, with my background, must say to make an implant is a lot easier than to make a cancer therapy for a patient, right? So we have to have a very tight QM, and we're building it up at the moment, and we have to have a good network, as we do have, for example, with Philip. Philip is a very close partner, in our approach. So, as with everything, you have to know where the material come from. You have to have an additive manufacturing process which can be closely monitored, which is reliable, which can be repeated. The thousandth implant has to be as good as the first one. So all of this has to be built up. It's new, but of course it's doable. I mean, the 3D printing is not rocket science. Well, it is.
Martin,
it is a bit challenging.
Martin, there are industries where, for example, the companies have to be woken up by scientists, and the need for new technologies is pulled from the industry. There are other industries where the industry is much ahead of the scientific parties, so they are pushing innovation into this field. How about the medical sector? Are you asked from the clinics, from the scientists to develop new things, or are you pushing?
I like that question because it is a difficult one. Actually, I believe it's both. So we talked about cranial implants, and cranial implants is a very obvious application. Still challenging and maybe simple application, where still there's a lot of challenges ahead, which means once establishing a printing at point of care for cranial implants, the devil is in the detail. So you have to establish that quality management, for example. And while physicians and surgeons are pushing the boundaries and requesting and giving visions, we sometimes are driven by that. And if I take a look at you, Ute, for example, you announced that you believe that we will print during surgery an implant. I see you as a physician now. I see this as a push because I, as an industry representative, do not see that realistic because there's post-processing, there's design, there's approval, etc. Yeah, just to finish that. And therefore, I see even in this small group where we are located here, there's a push from the clinic and a push back from the industry side, because I personally believe that we have to have some extra time on that. On the other side, if we talk about resorbable polymers, which end up in the patient and are degraded and become bone, we see again a push from physicians because they believe if you put in a mini plate or an implant and it translates into bone, that's that's the magic again where we started initially, and that's desirable outcome for the physician. Still, polymers which are degradable are today not on that level to print implants in that size. But still, there's a push at some point in time. Probably Philip is able to answer that. In some point in time, I do believe that we will find capabilities of having polymers which become bone. We talk about p-calcium phosphate enriched PEEK, for example. So we enrich our existing material with materials which are pathing the way to that application. But I would say the vision sometimes comes from the physician, and the pushback conservatively comes from the industry. And for obvious applications which have been standard for the last decades, it's vice versa. We challenge that an instrument must be made out of metal. It can be made out of polymers. It can be re-sterilized 500 times. There's certificates from Evonik, from us. There are validation processes. Reduce that weight, heavyweight material in the OR by polymers and have the same life cycles. This ideas comes from the industry and not by physicians or nurses.
Philip, I saw you smiling.
Yes, I'm happy to say something to this topic for sure. And I would like to give it in some context. So I think what's the most important part for every one of us should be the patient in the end, and the unmet need or the demand of the patient that the patient has. So we as a raw material supplier, how can we get to this information? And this is really by the interaction in networks, in partnerships, with the surgeons. I mean, we are never going to be selling our materials to surgeons most likely, but we need to understand what is troubling there in the everyday business. And then we know our materials, we know our polymers all the way down. And based on that information, we can then come up with solutions that solve these problems, that can lead to the next generation of devices and implants. We can modify our polymers, we can push new processing technologies. And by doing this, we can then provide the solutions and push this into the market. And the example that Martin also mentioned is PEEK is being used for many times in the medical device industry. And now there's the demand that it should stick closer to bone, for example, which is not the natural behavior. So we go back into our labs, to our scientists, and we develop a material that accelerates that healing process, that attachment of bone. And with this solution, there comes the next generation of polymers. And this is always how it is. So it's a back and forth. And we can push something into the market, but we are not smart enough to know everything that is needed. So we need the networks, we need the feedback, and we need the information from the end users, the surgeons, what the patients need.
Professor Schäfer, are you a pusher or a receiver of innovation?
But both, of course. We are using 3D printing, so we are also a receiver of the new technologies, and we're very happy, to use this technology in a big network and support from industry and scientific partners. But we're also a pusher. As Martin said, he doesn't believe that we can do the cranial implant within an operation. Of course, we can already, but that's not the point. We do not want to carry or to make something in hospital at the point of care which is already optimal for the patients. So we're looking at applications which are not optimal for the patients, like the cranial implant, where the bone starts to change, and we have difficulties. Or there's another application, that's the humerus. The humerus is, that's the part in the upper bone. So the humerus is turned in itself, but we only have plates which are straight. It doesn't follow this, so the broken humerus is instable. So we are now developing plates which are fitting the humerus, because otherwise it's the plates have to be turned in the operation theater, and they're totally dependent on the expertise of the surgeons, whether they can do it very well or not, so the patient is depending that he finds a surgeon who has done it 1,000 times. So that's one of the part. The other part is, for example, the rib. So the rib is very difficult to replace with any kind of plates we have at the moment. So we're developing this kind of stuff too, right? And here comes Philip into the game. We need different materials for different applications. Even PEEK for the cranial implant is not the best material. PEEK has been used because it has been certified. And once a medical product company certifies something for the medical field, you know, it's so expensive, they don't look at a second material. But there's a lot better materials than PEEK, you know. So, you know, with the additive manufacturing, the network of material suppliers, you know, we can now look into, you know, materials and technologies, you know, where we can make better implants, you know, for specific implant applications, you know, and push forward. You know, one of our next things is, you know, we're looking in our project, we're also looking at what happens to the implant when it's in the body. So that, you know, if especially with humerus, for example, there is a lot of, you know, pressure on it, a lot of movement, you know, are our implants good enough to withhold this, you know, and how do we know this, you know? Sensors is a new field. Imaging is a very important field that has to be, you know, extended, you know. We cannot put two, you know, we can image soft parts, and we can image hard parts, bone, but we can't put those two images together. So if you have a tumor in the brain and, you know, you would like to have a 3D model of this to know how to operate, you can't do it because you can't put those two images together. I mean, we have loads to do. And yes, we are pushing, but we are also receiving.
Martin, one question, one of the last questions of our today's show, because we have nearly come to the end, is are the authorities keeping up with the speed of the industry and the clinics? Do you have the impression that the legal aspect of accepting new technologies, new materials in your realm are supported sufficiently by the authorities, or do you see a lack of speed?
Depending on the markets, I would say. So if you look into Europe currently, I believe there is a gap, and this gap is to be filled and will be filled within the next quarters. Let's be optimistic. I hope it's not years. If you look into the Americas with the FDA, I believe FDA is very well prepared for point-of-care manufacturing of medical device manufacturing for industry standards. And if you look into Asia-Pacific markets, the growth of India, for example, you see a lot of technology adoption happening without any regulatory background, which simply is the technical feasibility. So it depends on, if you take the core market of Europe, I would say there's still a lot of things to do and to roll out and to define. But we are on a good way, and MDR is not a frog to be swallowed, but MDR can be a beneficial guideline and law to enable us to work on the highest possible standard for patient safety. And that's all what it's all about. So it's not something to harm innovation. It's something to keep the patient safety on the highest level possible. So therefore, embrace the change. MDR is real now.
Philip, do you share this opinion?
Yes, I agree. I think it's always a back and forth, and in a nutshell, I would say, and I think Martin covered this as well. So I think in the US, for example, the FDA is very flexible on adapting to changes, also in technology, and will find a solution and work with this. In Europe, that processes might be a little bit slower, and the communication back and forth maybe could be a little bit better, that you don't have a huge jump that then kind of everyone is stumbling and what to do with it now. We'll find it out, we'll work with it. But it certainly has been a big jump, this new medical device regulation, and how to deal with it and what to do with it. And for sure, this also hindered some innovations in Europe, but I don't think on the long term. So maybe the best choice is somewhere in between. But it's all developing continuously, the requirements, the regulatory boundaries, and that is important, of course, because the technology is evolving.
You know what? Today I got the impression that there's a very nice and good cooperation among the actors in this field. That means the scientists, the material manufacturers, and the machine manufacturers. And I have the good impression that innovation is on a very good way, and all of you that I've known today in this talk are real pushers, so I enjoyed that very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our today's K-Talk. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for participating, and all the best. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today. If you want to watch our K-Talk again or share it with your friends and colleagues, just have a look at our landing page where we will shortly place the video on demand. If you want, we will meet again next month in our 3rd edition on March 24th. We will discuss about trends in the mechanical engineering segment of the plastics industry, so don't miss it. Thanks for watching, stay healthy, and bye-bye.